He's talking about the enemy within our country, Pennsylvania. He's talking about that he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged.
So let's put it simply, she's a communist. We're not going to have a communist leading our country. But here are the facts. Kamala Harris is a radical left Marxist, rated even worse than Bernie Sanders.
3 weeks from Election Day, and the rhetoric between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is growing sharper. Harris is questioning Trump's health and stability while also labeling him a threat to democracy. Trump, too, is questioning Harris's health, saying she's losing the campaign and desperate. Both candidates are on the campaign trail today, Trump in Georgia and Harris in Michigan. Joining me to discuss the latest in the presidential race and much more, Brett Samuels, White House reporter for The Hill. Brett, Harris is making Trump's health a key part of her attack on Trump here in the final weeks of the election. Talk about how this looks in her rallies.
Yeah, well, that clip that we saw just a second ago is actually a good example of how she is increasingly sort of using Trump's own words at his own events and in interviews to sort of display to the audience, give a sort of firsthand look at the kind of rhetoric he's using. We saw particularly in Pennsylvania where she played these clips on the big monitors in the rally of former President Trump, referring to his political opponents as the enemy within, suggesting that he might have to use the military or the National Guard to quell any unrest from those political rivals. So this is sort of a new twist where we're not just seeing her talk to audiences about the threat of Trump taking office if he wins in November, but actually trying to show them firsthand, hey, this is the rhetoric he's using, making the argument that he is, as she said, unhinged or unstable.
Now, Trump is responding, questioning the results of a medical report released by Harris and saying he's the healthiest candidate in recent history. But apparently he's not going to release further medical records, correct?
Yeah, it certainly doesn't appear that way. He said in a Truth Social post, actually, that he was too busy, essentially, campaigning to release additional medical records. The Trump campaign has pointed to these letters that Ronnie Jackson, a congressman and former White House physician, put out when he was caring for Trump after his ear was wounded in that assassination attempt in July. But otherwise, we haven't seen anything from Trump's physician in almost a year. It was November of 2023 when we saw a sort of vague general medical report come from Trump's physician. So that's what voters have to go off of. Trump has shown no indication that even though he's 78, he'd be 82 at the end of his second term. There's no indication that he's going to give voters anything more to work with as far as his medical history.
Kamala Harris has agreed to a sit-down interview on Fox News. Harris will speak with Fox host Bret Baier tomorrow for an interview that will air Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Baier says the interview will be unedited and no topic is off limits. Bret, this seems like a pretty big moment for Harris.
Definitely, yeah. It's her first appearance on Fox News, possibly ever. Certainly for first appearance of this campaign cycle, she did not appear on Fox News for an interview when she was a presidential candidate in 2019 and 2020 in the Democratic primary. So a big moment. Harris sort of stepping into uncharted territory here, going on Fox News. I would expect this to be a really tough interview, maybe the toughest interview that she has faced as a candidate, that alongside 60 Minutes, which aired last week. So certainly a sign, I think, that the Harris campaign is sort of, willing to take some risks here and reach out to different voters with just a few weeks left till Election Day.
Trump has sort of a love-hate relationship with Fox News. What's he been saying about the interview?
Yeah, he hasn't taken it super well, I think, to your point that he has this love-hate relationship. He swiped at Bret Baier and suggested that Bret Baier is not fair. Bret Baier is widely considered to be a very fair reporter, fair journalist, and that he's going to ask tough questions. But Trump has sort of complained, about Fox News having Kamala Harris on its airwaves, having Kamala Harris spokespeople on its airwaves. He's taken issue essentially with Fox doing anything that might give airtime to the Harris campaign. So certainly would not be surprised if we see the former president weigh in once his interview airs on Wednesday.
Kamala Harris is being accused of plagiarism in a 2009 book called Smart on Crime that she co-authored. Conservative activists have identified several passages they say Harris lifted from other sources without proper citation. Brett, are these allegations true, and how is the Harris camp responding?
Yeah, so, some plagiarism experts have weighed in on this. The Harris campaign has weighed in on this, and the consensus seems to be that these are not real serious allegations of plagiarism. There are some instances where perhaps there was not exact citation, but plagiarism experts have said that this is not a case of Harris, cribbing ideas without attribution or stealing ideas and making them sound as if they were her own. The Harris campaign has said that this was a book that came out 15 years ago and that throughout it there was proper citation that she used. So this is something that certainly I think folks on the right are trying to gin up into something of a controversy, but there's no real evidence yet, at least, that that this is going to break through to voters and that this is taking the form of a serious controversy for Harris.
A Trump campaign town hall event in Pennsylvania yesterday was cut short after 2 medical emergencies. Trump then proceeded to dance with his supporters for more than 30 minutes. The Trump campaign said it was a very special moment, but it led Harris to question whether Trump is okay. Brett, what did you think about this kind of surreal moment on the campaign trail?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of Trump rallies, and I have not seen one sort of transform into what we saw on Monday night, where, as you said, Trump appeared to essentially get, either frustrated or just decided that it was not worth continuing with this town hall Q&A format after there were a couple of extended pauses because of folks fainting in the crowd. It was very hot in this warehouse or venue where Trump was hosting this event. And he just appeared to say, at some point, enough with this, let's just listen to some songs that I like. It was, as you said, the Trump campaign kind of viewed this as evidence that Trump is a candidate unlike any other, that he connects with his supporters, that he can play music and folks in the auditorium will sway along and dance along with him. But for the Harris campaign, this was sort of another example of Trump, perhaps behaving in a bizarre way, as Harris said in that clip we saw at the top, an unhinged way perhaps. And so the Harris campaign is just using this episode to again sort of question whether Trump is fit for office, whether he's got the mental acuity to serve for another 4 years.
Republican allies of President Trump have taken major steps to purge election rolls and allow partisan officials to challenge election results. Trump supporters say it's all in the name of election security. His detractors warn it could block legal voters from participating in the election and allow votes to be overturned. Brett, explain what Republicans are doing here.
Yeah, so Republicans have really, since the 2020 election, have tried to sort of get aggressive ahead of the 2024 election to, as you mentioned, purge voter rolls of non-citizens, purge voter rolls of folks who are deceased or folks who no longer live in a state. They filed a lot of lawsuits about who can vote, what votes can be counted, when votes can be counted. So this is really just sort of the latest instance, I think, of this really aggressive strategy from Republicans to essentially change the discourse and change the laws around who can vote, when can they vote, when do votes get counted. This is something that stems from that 2020 election where Trump really challenged the results, and this potentially makes it a lot easier for Republicans to challenge results in 2024 if things don't go the way they want in November.
And Republicans say this is all in the name of election security, but it seems like this could lead to chaos in the days after the election as votes are coming in, especially if the winner is still kind of hanging in the balance.
Yeah, certainly. It opens up the door, I think, to a lot of uncertainty, as you said, a lot of potential lawsuits that Republicans and possibly Democrats may file depending on how the results are looking. We know that there are states that will take a couple days at least to count all their votes because of the way that early votes are counted versus election day votes are counted. We saw that in 2020 where Pennsylvania, for example, took multiple days to count their results. So certainly I think something to watch as folks kind of brace for potential chaos, really, if that election, as you mentioned, is really razor close on Election Day.
We're getting more reaction to Donald Trump's comments that the military or National Guard could be used to fight against possible disorder from what he calls the enemy within, which he said includes radical left lunatics. Jake Tapper on CNN sparred with Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, over the issue. Youngkin wouldn't really respond to what Trump actually said, but Brett, Harris and Walz seem to be making this a key part of their campaign.
Yeah, certainly. I think that Glenn Youngkin interview is a great example of kind of what we saw when Trump was in office for 4 years, where Republicans are really put on the spot. They're forced to answer these uncomfortable questions where they want to dance around it, and eventually they're confronted with Trump's own words, and that's what they have to respond to. But Certainly, I think to your point, Vice President Harris and Tim Walz are trying to make this more of a centerpiece, this idea that Trump, is a threat to democracy, that he will go after his political opponents, either with the Justice Department or, as he is suggesting now, maybe even using the military to go after his opponents if there's unrest. So I think it's an example of Vice President Harris and her campaign really trying to create this sense of urgency and really sound the alarm ahead of Election Day.
The U.S. government is giving Israel 30 days to boost humanitarian aid to Gaza, or it says it will cut off some military assistance. What are the U.S. officials saying about the situation on the ground in Gaza, and what weapons could be cut off here if the Israelis don't comply?
Yeah, certainly, we saw this letter from Secretary of State Antony Blinken where he's laying out this 30-day timeline for essentially for Israel to take more action to get more humanitarian aid or face consequences. And, certainly this is something that the Biden administration has for months been pleading with Israel to do more to protect civilians in Gaza, to do more to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. They've been calling for essentially Israel to be more mindful as it carries out this military campaign against Hamas. Now, the question is, of course, once 30 days have passed, will the Biden administration follow through on cutting off some of these larger weapons that they're threatening to withhold from Israel? We've seen them use this kind of harsh rhetoric before, but the Biden administration has continued to support Israel. So I think the question is whether there's follow through here and whether things actually change.
All right, that's all I got. Brett Samuels, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Drew.
There's still a persistent and dangerous flow of misinformation about recovery efforts in Western North Carolina that can lead to threats and intimidation, breeds confusion, and demoralizes storm survivors and response workers alike. If you're participating in spreading this stuff, stop it.
Strong words from North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper after misinformation surrounding the response to Hurricane Helene in North Carolina has led to threats against relief workers and false rumors that truckloads of militia were descending on the area. On Monday, a man was arrested near a relief site with a loaded handgun and rifle. He's been charged with threatening FEMA workers. Our partners at Nexstar Nation's WGHP in High Point, North Carolina, have the details.
Rutherford County deputies arrested 44-year-old William Jacob Parsons of Bostic, North Carolina, and charged him with threatening FEMA workers in the Lake Lure, Chimney Rock area. We talked to Parsons, and he admits to being angry. He posted this on Facebook.
We the people are sick and tired of the BS. We the people are seeking volunteers to join us to overtake the FEMA site in Lake Lure and send the products up the mountains this Saturday. We the people are done playing games. It's time to show who we are and what we believe. They want to screw our citizens. Now we return the favor.
Parsons says he was so upset and went to Lake Lure to respond to what he says were social media reports that FEMA was withholding supplies.
I viewed it as if our people sitting here on American soil. They're refusing to aid our people on American soil. We were going to go up there and forcefully remove that fence.
Deputies got a report that a man with an assault rifle made comments about possibly harming FEMA workers. Once they got a description of the person, they went to arrest him. Deputies eventually caught up with Parsons, and he was found with a handgun and a rifle. Parsons says he was simply exercising his rights. He insists that the post was a call for action, not violence.
Then they want to sit here and lie, say that I'm carrying guns around. I had one gun on me, which was legally owned and seen on the side of my pocket, on my hip. And I had a rifle and another pistol that were in my vehicle that were both lawful and legal to own.
After driving to Lake Lure, Parsons says he didn't find FEMA withholding supplies, but it was too late. Law enforcement had been alerted.
Yeah, I went up there and I seen there was absolutely nothing there. And I stayed and I volunteered all day.
Parsons was arrested and charged with going armed to the terror of the public. He insists he was simply exercising his Second Amendment rights and the weapons were legally owned. Parsons was released on a $10,000 secured bond later that same day.
And thank you to our partners at WGHP. FEMA announced Monday it resumed outreach efforts a day after the arrest. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.